Hello, everyone. My name is Ned Dennison. I'm the chairperson of the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. We have a special guest with us tonight, Pat Gallant-Charette. If you say hello, Pat.
Hi, everyone.
Pat, many claims to fame, but one of the more interesting ones is she started her marathon swimming career at age 58, completed the Triple Crown, the original Triple Crown, and we still show her holding seven records for the oldest female swimmer. That's Sagaro, North Channel, Molokai, Lake Ontario, Lake Tahoe, Loch Ness, and around Manhattan. And then she also, at one point, had the third fastest female Gibraltar time at 3 hours and 28 minutes, which is cooking in Gibraltar. So we have Pat on to talk about things that have happened since then. About 4 years ago, at age 69, you set two goals, which we just absolutely love. The first one was to get faster, and most swimmers don't get faster after the age of 25, so we're going to talk about that, and something called the Stillwater 8. So let's start about speed, Pat. Tell us,
Okay.
tell us how you went about getting faster.
Well, after my swim attempt of Cook Strait in New Zealand, I recognized that I needed to get faster because I was too slow to have a successful swim of Cook Strait. So when I came back, I was on a mission to have my stroke analyzed and also to lose weight. And over a 2 year period, I did lose a significant amount of weight. Then I hired Kirsten Reed. She's well recognized and respected in the state of Maine. And she analyzed my stroke and she said that I was, dropping my elbow. I'd had a very poor catch. I just wasn't pulling the water the way I should have. So in a matter of time, she significantly made me go faster. For example, I was swimming, I would do 100-yard freestyle in about a minute 55, 2 minutes, which is really slow. But she got me down to about a minute 38, minute 40 for a 100-yard freestyle. And that's a significant improvement. And I was so excited, and I was supposed to go back to Cook Strait a couple of years ago, but the organization that I was with, something happened, and they could not do it any longer, so I had to cancel out. And then I got COVID in 2023. And I was very sick with that. I got long COVID for 8 months. I was on doses of prednisone and inhalers, and the weight was coming back on, and I was having problems with my breathing. So what I did, I stopped with the speed work. And when I went to the pool or any open water, it was just for the endurance part of it. But I truly believe, I don't care what age a person is, that if they have a poor stroke technique, that if they have it analyzed, they can go faster. I don't care if you're 80, or 30. If you're not swimming correctly, you have someone who knows their stuff, analyze it, and a person will go faster.
I always tell people, if you watch the Olympics and the finals of anything, they all line up, they all go in the water, and they all have a different stroke.
Yeah.
So there's no perfect stroke. And when you stand on the shore and watch somebody, it's really obvious to see some things like that person's left hand comes into the water by their ear,
Yeah.
or that person's right arm comes out and waves 4 or 5 times to the crowd before it goes back in. So I'm a big believer that everybody can improve. It takes a bit of willpower, and
Yes.
it takes putting your ego in a bit of check.
Yes.
Tell us about the Stillwater 8. Most people don't know what it is, but they can probably guess the Stillwater probably means lakes, but we're not sure. Tell us what it
Okay.
is.
Well, years ago, Michelle Macy and a group of her friends, apparently they were in Spain. They were all sitting around having a beer, and they were discussing about having some type of competition, but with lakes. And at the time, Ocean Sevens was very, very popular, and it still is. And I completed 6 of the 7 of the Ocean Sevens. And the Stillwater 8 kind of piqued my interest because I had a friend that said, why don't you try swimming Lake Ontario, up in Canada? That's a really tough swim. So anyway, I happened to notice that Lake Ontario was on the Stillwater 8. And it's very, the swims that they selected was very challenging. It was Lake Zurich, let's see, I have a list: Loch Ness, Tahoe, Taupo, Ontario, Lake Titicaca, Lake Malawi in Africa, and the Sea of Galilee in Israel. So I was thinking at the beginning that a lake swim would be a lot easier. And I'll tell you right now, I was wrong on that part. Lake Ontario, in my whole career, and it's been 27 years, almost 30 years of marathon swimming, that by far was the toughest swim of my career. It took me over 24 hours. The water was frigid in some areas, and it was just an incredibly difficult swim. And then Loch Ness, I found Loch Ness to be more difficult than the North Channel. And people are surprised by that, but the thing is, even though the water was calm, it was so darn cold. It was much colder than the North Channel. And let's see, what else? Oh, Lake Tahoe. I almost threw the towel in at the halfway mark. I couldn't stand how cold it got at night, because we started the swim. It was like 7 o'clock in the evening. Air temperature was warm. Water temperature was warm. And all of a sudden the sun sets, and that surface water, because it was so calm, it was so cold. I was shocked. And I made it to the finish line, but it was not pretty. But if I had to say, if I had to compare the Stillwater 8 and the Ocean 7s, and I do know that on any given day, whether it's the English Channel or Lake Ontario, you can have different circumstances. It could be, calm one day and force 5 the next. But the days that I did the Ocean 7s and the days that I swam Stillwater 8, I say the Stillwater 8 is lots more challenging than the Ocean 7s.
And are you typically going on the day you schedule, or is it similar to kind of waiting for a weather window?
It was basically the day that it was scheduled. I just happened to luck out. But they usually said, like for Lake Ontario, might have to have two or 3 day window. But usually it runs about the same as the Ocean 7s, that you hire a boat pilot, you go through, a swim organization, you have to have an observer, and you talk to the pilot, and they even though there's no tides to be concerned with, but heavy rain will cause the flow of the rivers come into the lakes. And that was a concern for Lake Ontario, because in the Port of Toronto at the finish line, there's a river that dumps into that. So if there was going to be heavy rain, you'd be like swimming against the tide, So there's a lot to, consider.
For historians of the sport and people interested, I would encourage you all to go read some of the stories from 1927, 28 and 29 about the Canadian National Exhibition, the original Wrigley Marathon swims. These were what we call majors. You'd get 199 men lining up, and 1 would finish or 3 would finish. And, the rest of them go to the hospital. I mean, it was just, I won't say bloodbath, because not the word, but if the cold didn't get you, then pulling the lampreys off your stomach would probably turn you off the swim.
Well, I have a good story about the lampreys, because I read that story about Lake Ontario, and one of the swimmers had to detach a lamprey and bit the head off and threw it back. And I'm thinking, oh, heavens. So when I got there, they said, no, they didn't have any issues. Well, about the first 10 minutes into my swim, I started to feel like snakes going around my ankles. And I knew immediately it was lampreys. Well, my crew and I didn't want to say I have lampreys. I just started kicking. They said they've never seen me kick so hard and so fast ever. But that was only for maybe 5 minutes, and then I had no issues. But I had a good chuckle because I knew exactly what was around my feet.
So, Pat, we have announced the induction of Joe Zamatis to the class of 2025. He and his brother John are tied with you at 6 in the Stillwater 7. Are you folks having a race?
No, they're welcome to be the first ones because I probably will not be going back to New Zealand, because Lake Taupo is in New Zealand. I was hoping to swim Lake Titicaca in Peru, but that kind of fell through. I mean, I was all ready to go, and they just never got organized enough. There's a lot of logistics and stuff. But this
they're both going to be in Jersey in May. So if you were of a mind of sneaking off under the quiet and doing it, I wouldn't mind announcing it from the stage.
Oh, I'll tell you, I'd love to go, but I'm a beekeeper now, and May, June is extremely busy time for beekeepers.
And how many hives do you have, Pat?
Well, right now I have 8 colonies, but I catch swarms, and so I'll be, putting maybe 10, 15 swarm traps. And and usually come April, May, that's when you start catching swarms. And so I'll be busy with that. I have all my little hobbies.
And do the people in the neighborhood call you and go, Pat, I have a lot of activity in the attic. Can you come and help me out?
No, I intentionally don't put my name on the list to be notified, because I'm a member of the Maine State Beekeepers Association. I just don't have the time between swim training and my gardens and beekeeping. And, in another couple months, we're going to be getting ready for, tapping our maple trees, and then we have to boil that down, bottle it. It's just, never enough time in the day.
So when I grew up in Vermont, Pat, the mapling was, or sugaring, I should say, the sugaring was a tin pail and a kind of a spigot driven into the tree. Then it became tubes running down the side of the hill. And the last time I took a look, it was tubes with pumps. So they're actually sucking the sap out of the trees. Where are you on that scale?
Okay, I'm not at that level of having pumps and tubing all through the woods. I have a tap with a tube that goes into a pail, and it's a 5-gallon pail. But for the looks of it, I do have the 3 tin pails, like the old-fashioned way of doing it, because you can't beat that, so but I'm not into the pumps and all that stuff. It'd be a lot easier, but I like, the old-fashioned way.
And how many gallons are you ending up with at the end of the season?
Oh, it's really hard to say. Every year is different. But we got, I don't know, maybe a couple hundred bottles worth of maple syrup. It's a small operation. We just do 20, 22 trees, that we'll tap, and my son will help my husband and my grandkids, and it's a family affair.
For those who have no idea what we're talking about, what happens in New England in particular, there is rumor that they have maple syrup in Canada, but I refuse to believe that. About Maine, but I grew up in Vermont, so we're quite proud of our maple syrup. But what happens is the nights are quite cold, and essentially the sap will freeze. And then if the days are warm, the sap will run. You collect the sap, and am I correct, Pat? It's like 300 gallons of sap boiled down to 1 gallon of syrup. Is there some crazy
40,
number?
40 gallons of sap.
40. Okay.
Yeah, to 1 gallon of maple syrup.
Which is a lot of reduction.
Yeah.
So what's next for you? What's your next swim?
I have such a long bucket list of swims, and right now this is the first time in all these years of marathon swimming that I don't have a swim planned for next year. Because I was supposed to do Peru, but with that got canceled, a couple months back. I was thinking of after the holidays of contacting them again and seeing if I can go down, but I'm just so busy, that it's like feels kind of good just take a little bit of a break. But I have not retired. Okay. And I plan on continuing marathon swimming until I'm, well beyond my 80s. And I'll be 74 in a couple of months. So, I'm just hanging back a bit for this year. So
Tell us about going to the Strait of Juan de Fuca. This is again one of the very famous swims from the 1950s and 60s in Canada. Tell us about your experience up there.
okay, I did my research on the Strait of Juan de Fuca, and it's between Canada and the United States, the state of Washington. And I knew that the water temperature was going to be very cold, but where I had put on some weight from the COVID and the prednisone, I was hoping that would keep me warmer. I was wrong. When the swim started, okay, when I first got into the water temperature they said was 49, but it felt more like in the 30s, but it was in the high 40s. And it wasn't that long of a swim. It was probably, I don't know, 12 miles. And about an hour and 38 minutes into the swim, I started to experience hypothermia. And the hypothermia was not only just the clenched fist, but I started having spasms of the legs. And I recognized that I still had maybe, I don't know, 9, 10 miles to go. And I knew as a nurse that if I stayed in that circumstance of 49-degree water, that I would rapidly go into severe hypothermia. So I made the decision to stop the swim. And it was the first time in my career that it was my decision to stop. But I was looking at that health-wise. I had just gotten over long COVID for 8 months, and I had a trip to Italy coming up, and I didn't want to jeopardize my health for a swim. And so I stopped.
For the listeners out there, there are very few swimmers who can self-diagnose hypothermia. It's normally done by the crew and is best done by the crew. And the symptoms are really, really simple. They're called the umbles, the mumbles, grumbles, stumbles. And some of the things to look for is the stroke count goes from 60 to 50. Really bad sign. The swimmer cannot swim straight. They veer off away from the boat or run into the boat consistently. I can't swim 30 minutes between feeds without stopping and looking around with their mouth open, wondering where you are. In my case, I'm a reasonably tall guy. My feet just drop. They go from a pretty bad little flutter kick to dragging on the bottom of wherever it is and wearing my toenails down. And then finally, the swimmer can't really talk, the mumbles. And when the crew is trying to diagnose this problem, they ask you tricky questions like, where were you born? Now, you might actually remember where you were born, but it might take you 30 seconds to tell them, which is a really bad sign. So when you're diagnosing hypothermia, don't ask a swimmer to give you a yes or no. Ask them a kind of a tricky question like, what's my name?
Yeah.
And see what you get from them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Pat, listen, thank you very much for sharing your journey. It's very few swimmers who actually speed up over the age of 25. So congratulations. And a shout out to Kirsten, who's always mean to me when I see her. She swims faster than me and looks back and grins, which just upsets me to no end. And we look forward to hearing more about your adventures in the future.
Okay. Thank you, Ned.
If you've enjoyed this interview and talk, we have another 120 or so interviews on the Imshoff channel, and we'll put up in a second a set of contacts. You can also hit the subscribe button and you'll be notified when these come out in the future. So happy season greetings to everybody.